speaker today is founder and president of Strive to Lead, which is a consulting organization that delivers workshops in professional effectiveness, time management, and leadership. In addition to being a professional speaker, Kristin is an executive coach who works primarily with senior women leaders. Part of that program is the facilitation of positive intelligence courses. Before founding her own company, Kristin spent 20 years in sales leadership roles with Pearson Education. And during that time, she built award-winning teams of individuals who flourished both professionally and personally. She is certified by International Coaching Federation and also by Hogan Personality Assessments. Kristin holds a BSBA from Central Michigan University, but she describes herself as a person on a continuous learning journey. In addition to her membership in ICF, International Coaching Federation, Kristin is a member of Vistage, also a member of Conway Family Business Center, and NAWBO, which is National Association of Women Business Owners. She lives in Central Ohio with her husband and 2 children. Please join me in welcoming Kristin Schmitt to Columbus Rotary.
So they say that before you go up and speak in front of a group, you should take a quick walk around outside. But 2 minutes before, I realized I left all my handouts in the car, so I took a run instead. So anyway, there are handouts as takeaways from today's talk, so please, they're on the back table. Feel free to take one. So it's really exciting that I'm here. My first experience with Rotary, my grandfather was like a 50-year member in Saginaw, Michigan, and a long-time president. And then also in high school, my first exposure to leadership actually was through a Rotary leadership camp. So this is really a lot of fun for me to be here. So to start off, I want to tell you a story. Last fall, I was having breakfast with Ken, and we were just kind of catching up on things because I had spoken to his groups a couple of years prior, and he said, well, tell me what you've been working on and what kinds of workshops you've had, thinking maybe he'd want to bring me back in to speak again. So I started kind of naming off the things that I was talking about, and he went, nah, no, that's not going to work. And so he finally said, listen, I want you to come in, but I want you to think of something totally new and different for my group and use us as guinea pigs. And I thought, well, that's just fantastic because I'm really good at getting stuff done. I'm really good at helping people with their blind spots, but I am not a visionary. So I'm just sitting here kind of thinking about it. And so I called him and I said, Ken, tell me don't overthink this, but what's the single greatest challenge that business leaders have? And he said, no question, time management. So here we are. And it made a lot of sense after he said that because there's a component of time management in most of the clients that they struggle in some way, most people. So that made a lot of sense to me. So I thought about it and I thought, why is it that we struggle with this? I mean, there's every app and hack and book and program and this and that. So this problem should be solved. But the truth of the matter is it's not, right? We all continue to struggle with this. So I thought, how can we look at this a little bit differently? Well, all of these nifty tools that they have out here, they assume that we have the prerequisite skills to implement them. Now, who here has bought a piece of exercise equipment and then it just sat in your basement? So it's kind of the same thing, right? You buy that Peloton bike, you're not going to be like fit as a fiddle the next day just because it's in your basement. But so if we look at time management through the same lens, we want to look at it more holistically. So today I'm going to talk about 4 parts. First is creating an awareness. What are the stories that you tell yourself and what's your relationship with time? Then how do you take that awareness and arrange your schedule so that you're accomplishing the things that are going to get you to achieve your goals and objectives? How do you then execute said plan? And there are a lot of ways that we get in our own way on that. And then finally, how do you take what you're seeing and look at how it's going and adapt based upon something not working or you're changing priorities. So when we run into someone, haven't seen them in a while, we say, how are you? How do they answer?
Fine.
Busy.
Yeah.
But we're so busy being busy that we don't realize that why we're not getting the things done that we want to accomplish, right? So let's talk about this first awareness piece. The first thing you want to do is know your stories or the narrative that's running through your head. So I have two common ones. The first one is, you're never going to get this done. You're never going to get this done. You're going to hit the deadline. You're never going to get this done. Or conversely, it's, I am moving so fast and getting through this that I'm going to get 7 more things done on top of it. And then I set myself up for failure because I didn't get the 7 extra things done. So those are the two things. So understanding what is that thing that's playing in your head. Being aware of how you actually spend your time. Who here has audited, done a time journal or something of that nature to figure out how you're spending your time? Yeah, but about 20% of people have done that. I don't know what just.
No, that's me. Our friends online can't see your PowerPoint.
Oh.
Well, I mean, it's all me.
And then related to that, how well do you project how long something is going to take you? Because we tend to underestimate how long something will take in the short run, but overestimate how long it'll take in the long run. And then what are your emotions that you're carrying around what you're trying to accomplish? Are you looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do this. This always makes me feel so good. Or are you saying, really, do I have to do this? I hate this kind of work. And then, let's see. No, I'm not working.
That's me again.
And then finally, we all have something called a chronotype, which is how our internal clock works and when we have various energy levels. So for me, I'm best first thing in the morning, so that's where I try to do my deep work. But then in the afternoon, I try to make sure that I'm engaging with someone because that's going to keep me engaged and alert. So once we have that awareness, what do we do with it? And I'll go back to this for a second. When we think everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, right? So what are the things that we focus on that are truly aligned with our bigger picture and what we're trying to accomplish? And that's where arrangement comes in. So the first piece is focusing on the outcome rather than the activity. Now, what do I mean by that? It's the difference between work on taxes and get tax stuff to the CPA. And when we think about it through the lens of an outcome instead of an activity, it kind of propels us forward because it's moving us towards something, right? How do we find efficiencies? So this is where all your apps and hacks and all those kinds of things come in. But again, this is after you've done all the other work first. Figuring out a way to shift your emotions toward the task. So the actor Michael Caine has a reputation for showing up for shootings like spot on, like he knows his lines inside and out better than anybody else in the room. And someone asked him, how is it, you must really like memorizing your lines. How is it that you're so good at this? And he said, you know what, I actually hate memorizing my lines, but I love acting. So I tell myself I'm being paid to memorize my lines rather than I'm being paid to act. So shifting his emotions or doing something to do that. Delegate. Who here is good at delegating? Okay, that's pretty good. Only about 30% of business leaders feel like they are actually good at delegating. And then finally, just say no. So when someone invites us to lunch or asks us for a meeting and we don't really want to go, what do? We schedule it for 30 or 60 days out, right? And then we get to 30 or 60 days out and we still don't want to have lunch with the person. So Artie Isaac, who's one of my mentors, tells me, and he's my Vistage chair, says, if you don't want to do it that day, don't say yes. So thinking about it that way. What are the things that are on your schedule that you can take off? And then finally, when you get to the execution, looking at it in little pieces. So if you've done the alignment, you're prepared to work on the right things, right? But so then kind of taking that step in and looking at it more granularly, or what's the first thing that I need to do? So how do we execute? The first thing is plan in advance or take the decision making out of the moment. So what will happen, traditionally would happen, is I would have like an hour gap or a half hour gap between clients. So what would I do? Email. So now what I do is every Friday I plan for the next week, and then one step further, plan Monday, so that I'm not having to decide what to work on in the moment. So taking that piece out of it. Know how you get in your own way in terms of executing. So for a lot of people, this is email. Oh, I just got something in my inbox. I got to check it. Or one thing that I'll do is all of a sudden my head will start turning and I'll go, I wonder what day the 4th of July falls on this year. And then I get on Google and it all goes south from there. So knowing what are your tendencies and how will you plan for those. Scheduling protected time. So this is putting blocks of time on your calendar. It's a meeting with yourself to work on X. And that's just as important as any other meeting that you have. And that prevents other people from scheduling stuff on that time, and you've made it a priority to work on it. Then if you're in an office or you're expected to be easily accessible, manage the expectations around that. I'm going to be out of pocket for these 2 hours so that I can work on this. Please, don't contact me until afterward unless it's an emergency. Or maybe it's your boss has to have a bat phone, but nobody else can. But really kind of doing whatever you can to protect that time and managing the expectations around it. Because then you're also not questioning, what if they try to call me? Are they going to feel like I'm not available to them? Oh no. And it takes that little story out of our head as well. And then build in breaks. Even for the people that can concentrate the best, have the best focus, 80 to 90 minutes is about all you can do before you start that law of diminishing returns. There was a study done about a decade ago on judges in Israel, and they were trying to find correlation between anything and whether the parolees were being granted parole. And what they found was that it had nothing to do with the severity of the sentence. It had nothing to do with the severity of the crime. It was when the case was heard. So in the cases where they were heard first thing in the morning or after a break, they had a really high chance of being granted parole. The people that were at the end of the day, nada. So even judges. And then habit stacking. Has anyone heard of habit stacking? Or know it? So combining two things, one thing that you really like with maybe a task that you don't want to do. So a lot of people will say, I'll listen to this podcast, but only when I'm working out. Same thing, I'm going to drink this tea, but only when I'm working on X. Or I'm going to light a candle when I'm doing this work. So something to make that experience more pleasant. And then getting all these things into place, recognizing that you must adapt too. You're not going to be perfect. So don't expect perfection. Look at how it's going and what you might need to shift, what you might need to give more time, that sort of thing. When you eat the one piece of cake, don't eat the whole cake. Just stay the course, right? So don't give up just because you slid one time. And then reevaluate yourself regularly. How is this working? What might I need to shift? What can I look at a little bit differently? And then evolve as needed and just keep refining and refining. So the handouts that I talked about that I was running for, the first one is this energy optimization activity. And what I ask you to do here is list all the activities, and you can either do your whole holistic life or you can do just your work. But what are the things that you're spending your time on? What percentage of time? And then taking that activity, how much time do you want to spend on it? And where you're trying to make a change, what's the strategy that you're going to employ? Are you going to look for efficiencies? Are you going to try to shift your brain so that your attitude changes toward it? Are you going to delegate, or are you just going to cross it off? And then the other thing that I have for you is, I talked about all these different practices. I ask you to evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of those, so that you can better help identify where you might have opportunity to improve. So again, awareness, arrangement, application, and adaptation. And so I'm hopeful that some of this stuff resonated for you today, and that you can use it going forward. And with that, questions or thoughts? Yes.
This is not a setup, because you've been talking all around this. You didn't say it so many words, but prioritization is one of the greatest challenges in our life. And that combined with what I call the perishability of time. If you don't do something when you have it, unless you have a time machine, you can't go back and fix it. Any ideas or thoughts on how you can grapple with those two perishabilities?
So prioritization, I have kind of a 3-step. So I have a spreadsheet that's every single thing that I want to do. And that's just ongoing, and I don't look at it every week. And I find that like half the stuff will fall off. But from that, I then make a weekly plan. What are the things that I want to accomplish this week, and which of those are musts, which are shoulds, and which are if I get to it. And so I've then prioritized in that way, and then I break it down to, what am I going to accomplish when. I think to your point though, if you're asking, what do we do about the interruptions in the emergencies? And I think it's really looking at that. If every day is constantly an interruption, then looking at what needs to be done differently with the system or the process so that it's not constant emergencies. Or are you saying things are an emergency when they're really not?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about women business leaders?
About the organization?
Yeah.
So it's an organization, it's a national organization. There's chapters in cities throughout the US. It's called NAWBO, National Association of Women Business Owners. Columbus has, I think, the largest chapter and one of the most active chapters in the US. So in terms of it's partial networking, it's partial trying to further women in the business community. So there's a monthly luncheon and speaker. There's other events and virtual programming. They've actually been there's a public policy committee, so they're pretty active in terms of trying to influence policy in the state. But so that's pretty much all women who have started their own businesses, helping each other. Yes.
Maybe I missed this. So I'm working, I have a boss. The boss says, here are your priorities, period. How do I go from there?
So I would suggest making, get time to train the boss. But in all seriousness, I would say asking for a little bit of window dressing. Why are these the priorities? Making sure you're aligned in terms of what that means and when it's due and what role, if any, he wants or she wants to have in it. So, but really kind of making it so that you are getting the tools that you need to accomplish it. And if you're not, then having a dialogue around that. Yes, in the back.
I had the same question, but one of the techniques that I learned was, as an employee, you schedule time for what to do. First of all, you don't schedule a full 8-hour workday or however many hours you work. You schedule something called BIPs, which is boss imposed priorities. So I would schedule that, and that would help. So for the young people, when you face that.
That's a great idea. one other thing, and yes, to your point about, I was also, this is where I'm really guilty, open time does not mean it's available time. So looking at it this way. Yes?
I think one of the things that I found during the pandemic is myself and my colleagues is that because of Zoom and things like that, we tended to stack more meetings. And just because we were working from home and everything was remote, we were actually working a lot more and thinking that we could accomplish a lot more because we didn't have to travel or do things. And it really, I think, it resulted in a lot of burnout amongst people. So, I mean, what are some of the things that you're hearing as businesses and others are trying to stay in remote work? What are you, I guess, making recommendations around, or what would you recommend?
So, I mean, there are a lot of different things to try. I mean, I think, does this need to be a meeting? Or, in some cases, actually, my sister-in-law had a colleague that she would have a Zoom meeting for her team every morning at 8:15 to make sure everybody was up. So, I mean, so making sure, what is the purpose of this meeting? And does it need to be a meeting, or are we just trying to make sure people are working? If you do have a meeting-heavy environment, making it a policy to stop at 8:55 so people have 5 minutes in between to reset and get a drink of water, whatever. But I think having crystal clear expectations and attaching the outcomes to what's the end game or what do we need to achieve, not how much time do we have to spend. Those are kind of some different things to try, but then yes, really checking in with people. How are you doing? You seem down today. Is everything okay? And recognizing that, yeah, this is really real. And as companies are trying to figure out this, what is it, hybrid? Is it all back? Is it home? That's still a very real thing, but really keeping your finger on the pulse. And especially right now with talent being such a premium, you really have to make sure people are feeling cared for. Yeah. Yes?
What are the 3 things you would say to do to get started on better time management? If you were just saying, okay, I want to get started for 15-minute hour.
So do the planning in advance, know what the priorities are for the week, and map that out. Blocking protected time to get the things done, and then really continually assessing what's working, what's not, why is that the case, what do I need to do differently? Yes.
How much of the problems you know to over busyness is unique or stronger in American management practice compared to other places, Western Europe or Japan or China?
I haven't worked with folks outside the U.S., so I can't speak to that very much. I mean, other than just to say that our culture, and I think it is shifting a little bit, but I came up, it was a badge of honor to say you were working 80 hours a week. And that's very unique to the U.S., I think. I think now, as we're seeing burnout and those kinds of things, companies are being forced to really look at it. But I'd say it's a societal expectation. And so really making sure that, obviously the business needs need to be met, but that we're taking care of our people and really looking at things, is what I have in my head as the structured work week, is that necessary? Or where can we be flexible here?
I can contribute what somebody taught me one time to that question. The Asian cultures think spherically, like the world is a sphere, and they think about everything that's going on. And the Western cultures, like the U.S. and Europe, think linear. And once you realize that, it helps you figure out why the Asians can take these super long lead plans, and we're like, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? What's next in line? And you find that I didn't travel that much of the world, but I spent a lot of time with Asians and I spent a lot of time with Europeans. And I found that to be a very helpful thought that went in my head. It doesn't let you solve anything. Everything you said is absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But you gave it all the meat that goes around those bones.
Thank you. Yes.
We have a lot of young people here tonight, here today, and I'm curious about, in your experience working with teams, intergenerational especially, how much of it do they get to co-create? I know a lot of young people say, I 40 equal hours. I do 50, 55, 60. Do I got to get ahead? Or expectations, like Mark said? What are your experience about teams and training and co-creation of balanced needs?
I think that the biggest thing is creating psychological safety. So making it an environment where people can contribute ideas, speak what's on their mind, be vulnerable without fearing negative ramifications. So that's the biggest thing, I think. I think also just generational differences, looking at those without judgment. I mean, I tell a story about a woman that was she was newly out of college and sales rep for me, so stressed out and blah, 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 and she couldn't get her work. And I was kind of like, you know, put on the big girl pants. But that was judgment. So really looking at our world, Gen X was raised very different than boomers and, Gen Y and now Gen Z. So really understanding those generational differences and having dialogues around them and respecting the other side. Yes.
Just comments, being definitely a boomer, late boomer, and being part of the B, I was the B part, and a couple of observations. I want your opinion of this. What I found in a lot of my management team is they almost took pride in how many emails they were behind. Second, what I found in the VIP part is that as the boss puts in another task, you cannot take on more of those tasks until you figure out how to delegate some of the things that are already on your plate. So keeping a full plate versus one overflowing was kind of critical for you to be self-aware of, okay, which one's the least priority, or which one of my team members or someone else in the organization can take on one of these to get it the hell off my plate so I can do the one that the damn boss wants me to do. Just observation, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think learning to delegate effectively is really important, and so really being, we don't delegate right because we don't want to lose control, or we're afraid it's not going to be done the way that we want to primarily. So being crystal clear in expectations, time frame, checking for acceptance so that the person can own it, and then not following. One trick is not following up. If they say they'll have it to you by Friday, not going there Friday morning and saying, how are we doing? And then if it's not done Friday, that's a different dialogue. But so I think that's delegation, that is definitely key. In terms of the email thing, I mean, there was a thing written a few years ago called the email charter, and it's our group agrees to abide by these expectations, like don't use reply all unless you need to, no saying thank you back, copying everyone, but yeah, really getting at why are you proud of that? I mean, it's the same thing with the, I work 80 hours a week.
Same syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
The other part of that delegation is what you started to talk about, was inspect what you expect. You've got to follow up, make sure that it's getting done, because you delegate what it's over.
And with that, though, looking at it not to be punitive, but to, if there's something getting in the way, helping the person get through it. Because I think, accountability is kind of a bad word for people, but it's not if there's window dressing around it.
Good job, good word.
We have time for one more. One more? It looks like I'm good. Thank you all very much.
You go that way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.